Noon. So we are in a period where tech is ahead of us. It's pushing us outside of our comfort zones and challenging us to change in so many ways. In this moment, we need thought leaders, policymakers, ethical leaders, visionaries, and founders who can steer the ship to the next industrial revolution in a way that creates more benefits than harm. This panel is symbolic of having different chairs around the same table. We have different voices and perspectives represented around the table of artificial intelligence. For the next 60 minutes, we're going to put AI in the center of the conversation and layer in economic opportunities, workforce challenges, industry applications, national security, policy, and more. I want to start by having each of our speakers share how they consume, manage, and approach AI in their work and missions. And through this, I'd love for them to also give us a little bit of their background and how they came to AI. So Joe Jagadish, Head of Digital Payments and Contact Centers at TD Bank US, thanks for being a supporter. Dig into this AI table.
For sure. Thank you, Nicole, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So, I was thinking about sort of this question, and I thought I have a unique privilege in my role to run kind of 3 areas in the bank: digital banking, the contact centers, as well as the payments ecosystem, all which are really ripe for transformation through AI. But as I was reflecting on kind of my background, what got me here and into AI, I did want to share, I've been in banking for most of my career, but originally, by qualification, I'm an engineer, and I'm a hardware engineer, meaning I actually went to school to study chip design. And, shortly after that, started working out of graduate school, actually started working in a bank, but working in analytics and data. And this was, many years ago. I won't age myself, but one of the things that was interesting is at that time, kind of this background, everybody, the job market was really much in the front office. So I had this great background, and now I kind of sometimes reflect, well, what if I pursued a career in AI, in kind of what I actually went to school to study? How different would life be? But coming back to sort of the kind of the applications of AI in banking per se, it's a space that we're very heavily engaged in across TD Bank. We've got numerous use cases that are live today that we're actively working on, fundamentally centered around this concept of human in the loop. And I think we're hearing a lot about that. I know it's not a new term or a new phrase for anybody, especially those who've been kind of engaged in the AI ecosystem. And I think what we're seeing is an evolution of human in the loop, evolving to kind of humans as supervisors. And why I think that's so important is because we know that AI creates a lot of efficiency on repeatable tasks, but human judgment still is central to kind of the roles and the applications that we see AI perform. And so in the contact center, we're seeing in the initial phases of launching an AI solution, we saw 80% adoption in the first few weeks, which is a testament to the fact that colleagues, employees, people are ready to actually adopt it because it makes them more efficient. And so, we're testing and learning a lot of use cases, largely focused kind of internal to TD Bank. And over the course of the next couple of months and years, we're going to be talking more about what we're doing kind of customer facing. But the human in the loop concept for us has been really central to how we think about AI deployment across the organization. So I know this was an introductory question, and we're going to talk more about what that looks like.
No, that's great. We're going to get into human-centered AI, and we want to know more about what's going on with human in the loop. Thank you. Karen Kornbluh, Senior Advisor, Emerging Technology, Milken Institute. You also served as ambassador to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Developments. Tell us about your AI journey.
Well, thanks so much for organizing this, Nicole. You're such a great moderator. I love being on panels with you. So I've worked on data and technology my whole career, dating back to, I was just talking about this, coming right out of college, I was an economic forecaster at Alan Greenspan's economic forecasting firm. And then I was, my last job in politics was as, in the Biden White House as director of the AI office and acting chief technology officer. But I've always been on the deployment side, on the how is this being used, how should it be used in industrial settings and changing business models, and what should the policy be. And so what I think about with AI, I think of it as a continuation, not a break with the digital revolution. And I think about what we saw in the digital revolution back in the late 80s, early 90s. Computers were everywhere, but except in the productivity statistics, famously. And then suddenly, the computers were all connected via the internet in the late 90s. Productivity took off. And then I was just looking through the data today. When do we really see job change, and what would we think of as job change? Well, what about journalism? Because that was certainly so impacted by social media. That happened in 2007, 2008. That's when we started to see a real hit in journalism. And what happened there was, Facebook really disintermediated journalism, and and the internet in general took away the personal ads, and I mean the ads that were such the revenue source for journalism. So I think what we have to think about as we look at AI is not just the power of the tech, but how it's going to change businesses, how it's going to be deployed, and then that's going to work its way through in a bunch of sort of unexpected ways. But if we want to get the benefits of it, we have to really think about how to, and we'll talk about this more, how to focus on that, how to be intentional about it.
Absolutely, Karen. I want to dig into the workforce changes and disruptions and displacement further in the conversation. Eric Mandl, Senior Managing Director, Technology Investment Banking at Guggenheim Securities. Thank you for being a supporter. Dig into AI. Give us your journey.
Well, first of all, I just want to echo Karen's comments. Thank you so much for putting together this panel. It's a great group of folks. It's such an important topic, not only because in each of our lives it's so impactful, but there's a wonderful, exciting part of it, and then there's an unknown. And what we all grapple with, but maybe I'll double click from just a pure finance advisory perspective, is how do you measure this impact? Is it financial? Is it sociological? Is it evolutionary? Is it revolutionary? And of course, I think, it's sort of a trick question. And the answer is yes. Yes to all of that and then some. I'll share one thing that keeps popping into my mind, a very, very similar background. I started off studying computer science, and I knew very quickly I had to switch to finance. So I didn't stick with it. But in a way, there is something happening that many of us have been waiting for a very long time. And I think Karen's point is so astute. It's rather hilarious how long it takes for technology sometimes to be subsumed into things that should be dependent upon it out of the gate. So there's this very famous line, I'm not sure it's attributed to anyone, but in times of great change, things are usually bigger than expected, but they take longer. And I think we are right at the beginning of that moment. The market is working very hard to figure out how big this change is, but they don't know about the timing. And what does the market do when it doesn't know timing? It assumes it all happens right now. So listen, God willing, let's say in 10 years we're all sitting here and having this conversation again. I think there's going to be a lot more goodness than not. But I think the thing that we have to keep in the back of our mind is, what are going to be the applications that are demonstrable right out of the gate that also can have some sort of balance with social equity? And that's a very, very difficult question. I think we all believe finance may be an easier way to do that, but that usually takes the longest.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Igor Tulchinsky, founder, chairman, CEO of WorldQuant. Thank you for being a supporter of Milken. I'd love to get your AI journey, and you have a mix of AI and quantum, so happy for you to dig into that.
Hi, and thank you for putting this conference together and giving us opportunity to have all these discourses. So we've been using AI for a really long time, and we're really a family of companies. One is in asset management, some is in angel investing, some is in venture studios. There's even a free online university. So we do all kinds of things. And as someone who has been using AI for 20 plus years, I can say that what's happening now is it's a step change, it's a step function. So to say what we'll be doing in 10 years when we're sitting here again is a leap in imagination. AI is changing things profoundly. Many things that we do are 100 times faster, and we're just scratching the surface, and we don't even have enough people to put all the processes that are faster in place. You asked me about quantum. We have made a number of investments into different quantum companies in a venture arm, but we were not using quantum technology right now. Quantum technology is growing nicely and slowly, and the most likely use case for it will be solving some problems extremely fast, like 100 million times faster than conventional computers, but it's not something that's going to make GPUs disappear one day. Rather, it'll create different opportunities to do some of the things, like optimization and like cracking RSA codes and things like that, really easy.
Thank you, Igor. We're going to dig into national security and cybersecurity later in the conversation. Thank you for that. Kip Wainscott, Executive Director of Global AI Policy, JP Morgan Chase & Co. Thank you for being a supporter. Your AI journey.
Very happy to be here, by the way. Thank you so much. Very humbling to be a part of this group. It's an excellent panel. Listen, my career journey, I bring a policy lens to this work, and my journey really has been one of occupying various seats around the multi-stakeholder table for AI policy. It started in government. I was working on emerging technology policies at the Department of Justice and then in the Obama White House. I then moved over into a more academic setting. I was at the Stanford Cyber Policy Center working on a program basically interrogating sort of the global regulation of emerging technologies. And then I moved over into the tech industry and started writing and developing policies for technology products. I was the head of product and content policy at Snapchat for several years before landing in my current position, which is a really interesting role. I am a part of a team at JP Morgan Chase that is essentially established in the past 18 months or so as a firm-wide center of excellence for global AI and data policy issues. And we are evaluating the full wingspan of policy questions that are really emerging sort of in response to artificial intelligence. And I will just say that what's really fascinating and rewarding about doing this work from this platform is that JP Morgan Chase is really able to sort of occupy three unique vantage points, right? We're one of the world's largest deployers of these technologies, and we will talk more about what that deployment looks like in our context. We are one of the world's largest purchasers of these technologies. JP Morgan has an annual spend for technology of around $20 billion, and that puts us in a really central role within sort of as kind of a procurement node, but also within the innovation ecosystem of technologists right now and innovators who are building these tools and hoping to sell them one day. And then third, we're a really large financial institution, and so we have this institutional interest in unlocking the economic growth and the full potential of these technologies and ensuring that the outcomes here are beneficial and that they're unlocking value. And it really is very affirming to sort of look across these different vantage points and see that there's so much commonality, no matter how you're looking at these questions, in sort of the policy objectives that we really need to be elevating to really create trust, to establish confidence, and to really, ensure that the U.S. is positioned to succeed in this very transformational moment. And so it's really interesting work. Looking forward to digging into the discussion.
Thank you, Kip. And your comments about your $20 billion spend across, and you have over 300,000 employees at JP Morgan, that gets us to our AI and economy part of the discussion. I'd love to start with you, Eric. The market is shifting between concerns over heavy AI investment growth and optimism regarding AI-driven growth. How should we read these fluctuating sentiments?
Yeah, this is a great question, and central. I'm sure everybody in the room is thinking about this day in, day out. I've always found that sometimes the most calming thing in a moment of stress is data. It's very equalizing, and perhaps taking a page from Igor's book, when you understand the speed with which things are moving, that's one thing. But how they're moving with data kind of solves everything else. So a couple of statistics, which I think hopefully many of you know, but if you don't, it'll be a little shocking. But I find them shocking even though they're in my head. So the first is, to stick with the 10-year point, there are generally accepted consensus views that AI spend from an economy impact perspective is going to be somewhere between $4 and $5 trillion in 10 years. Now, if we realize that the hyperscalers alone, or the Magnificent Seven, are spending around $700 billion right now, we don't have to do show of hands. That $10 trillion is probably, that $5 trillion is probably understated. It could be 10, it could be 15. Some people say it could be the size of our current GDP, which is around 29 trillion. So once again, where are those dollars going? They're going into infrastructure. They're going into hybrid cloud deployments, and they're going into the acquisition of data. Here's another statistic. Hopefully it's calming, maybe it won't be. 90% of all data that exists on Earth was created in the last 24 months. Let that just sink in for a minute. The amount of total data on Earth doubles every 4 years. With AI, once again to Igor's point, it's probably going to be more like 2 years. So we have an exponential thing going on. Now, I was sort of joking with the comforting point, but this should be comforting. When you think about all of that data, the vast majority, is private. The way AI models work is they consume public data. Now, if they have relationships with governments, large companies, trading organizations, they can get access to that private data, and those models can learn. And then they can discern outputs from that, but they have to keep learning. The minute they stop, the minute they lose access to the data, they are no longer money good. So it's a lot of things to digest, but I think the theme that always keeps me grounded is if you're a company and you have all that private data, if you're a government and you have all that private data, or you're even an individual and you have all that private data, you're going to be very careful about how you allow people to access it. And I think the thing that gets missed in a lot of this, and I'm a deal maker, so I'm like, this is what I deal with all day long. At Guggenheim, we keep reminding our clients, the boards we talk to, software companies and AI companies, data infrastructure companies and AI companies, governments and AI companies are going to have to coexist, because the models are only as good as the access to the private data. And I think that thematic point is somewhat calming.
Great. I want to bring Kip and Joe into this conversation around how AI leaders should be, managing AI and deploying AI. What should be the AI strategy for large organization in this marketplace?
Yeah. So I think from an AI strategy perspective, I think we're really focused on where does AI really complement the work that we're already doing kind of across the organization. The three areas that I run, there's AI applications in all three areas. In digital banking, just to make this real for everyone, in digital banking, we're really rethinking what it means for customers to engage with us through mobile, right? What are the experiences that are now AI-powered through mobile that customers are going to be ready for? We know that over a third of the US population is already using some type of AI tool in their personal lives. So it's telling us that consumers are ready, right? But how do you make the visual experience, the interactive experience, how do we design for AI in mobile in an organization where our biggest currency is trust with customers, which is why I go back to the human in the loop, and all the controls that we have around it are so critical to us. But that's a space where we think very deeply about in terms of how do you design for AI in a channel that is increasingly important to our customers. In our contact center organization, a lot of our customers are calling us because, they're in a moment of need or panic or they have questions. And we found that deploying AI is actually making our bankers that are picking up the phones every day, it's making our bankers more effective in solving the needs of our customers in a much more quick and efficient fashion. So our first knowledge management tool that we deployed in the contact center, as I mentioned, we got 80% adoption in a couple of weeks actually. It's already reducing average handle time for our colleagues. We've actually deployed this knowledge management tool in some of our branches in Canada, and we're seeing fantastic results. And what this is allowing us as an organization is actually to spend more human time with our customers. So more face-to-face, more conversations that are actually driving quality and quick resolution. So I think my point in all of this, Nicole, being that I think AI, just like the internet revolution of the early 1980s, 1990s, and what that meant for banking was that it was making all of our jobs better and more effective, allowing us to build new products and service our customers in a much more, I'd say, organic way, and bringing convenience and ease into that interaction. And I think AI is no different, right? It is really enabling us to just be more effective in how we engage with our customers, the products we build. In payments, for example, it's really helping us look at fraud. And we're able to manage kind of the fraud, the transaction repairs that we have to do in kind of our payments ecosystem. So there are a lot of use cases, but at the end of the day, our goal in deployment of these solutions is to drive, obviously, efficiency internally for our colleagues, but be able to then drive more, I'd say, engaged dialogue with our customers. So some back office functions that are repetitive will see more engagement and more deployment of AI solutions, but that also just frees up capacity in our front office to be more effective and engage with our clients.
Kip, you want to jump in on your VR leadership?
That's a brilliant answer, and I'd love to just layer on a little bit from the JP Morgan perspective. But as leaders across enterprises are thinking about their AI strategies, I mean, one of our kind of guiding tenets here is that we're focused on delivering value here. We're not when we grade our AI strategies, we're not looking at the velocity of deployments. We're not looking at the scale of investment. We're looking at how are we adding value? Where can this add value? And there are three surface areas where I think that's been really apparent for us right out of the gates. I mean, one is looking at our customers and delivering value for them. On the fraud detection space alone, we have unlocked just in the past 3 years more than $1 billion in fraud loss preventions. We expect that over the coming 4 years, that will yield $3.7 to $3.8 billion in additional fraud loss savings. In addition, we've seen a 20% decline since we rolled out our latest AI models in fraud detection in false positive reportings from customers, despite a 2x increase in the detection of fraud hits. So real value for consumers there. Looking across our business operations, our LLM suite has been rolled out to 250,000 employees around the world. 160,000 employees are using it at least on a weekly basis. Among them, they on average report 4 hours increase in productivity week to week. And that is a real value unlock for our workforce. And then looking, third, sort of at our systems. At a systems level, we're seeing some really encouraging opportunities. Our technology team recently developed something that we've branded as the AI Threat Modeling Co-Pilot. And it's really enabled us to, much earlier in the software development lifecycle with much greater precision to identify risks and concerns from a cyber lens primarily. And these are just, these are really valuable contributions to our business and to our community. But one advantage that I think that we've had in being able to unlock this value is that banks have this long-standing relationship with risk management, especially in the technology space. We didn't have to build new architecture for risk management. We have governance infrastructure. We were familiar with, and it's been sort of an evolutionary journey with managing technology risk deployments. And this is something that I do think we bring a lot of lessons for the wider economy as to how to do this responsibly, how to do this in a way that is very outcomes focused and delivers value. And what I think we'd love to see is some of the learnings from the financial sector more broadly kind of applied to the deployer and enterprise communities and to inform sort of the dialogues right now around technology regulation and public policy.
Thank you. Igor, I want to get you into the conversation. You discussed that you have, just interests across asset management, across venture, across education and upskilling. How are you approaching AI across all of your ventures?
Well, you have to look at AI kind of from 10,000 feet up. And you have to ask yourself a question: where is AI actually most relevant? And I would say that that place is defense. Because without good defense, you're not going to have anything else. You're not going to have any other opportunities. Contrast big countries and small countries. Many small countries don't have as much data as we do. But they also don't have the quagmire of regulation that we do. And they can go and they can access all the data that's out there, and they can learn, and they can make their systems better, they can make their weapons better, and that's something to keep in mind. Then there are other big countries which don't really have regulation, and we have to be really careful from those countries. Now, I think I'm kind of answering a different question that you asked, but I figured I better get that in first. So we have an ecosystem, and we have many different places that discover and use AI separately and competitively. Within the hedge fund, there are many groups that do all kinds of things with it, from finding alphas to just making everything more efficient. Then we have the investment pipelines where we invest in these companies, and I think we invested in pretty much every quantum company at some point in time. And then we have the foundry, which uses current technologies to actually create a company. Every 2 or 3 months, new company comes off in a factory-like process. And the vast majority of them are AI, and I think we just hired a quantum expert there as well, because you never know.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Igor. I want to also just open this up to you, Karen. we're talking about the cost of building the next industrial revolution. Like we're all clear here that we are on a next step of technology, and for the work that you've done across policy, I'd love to get a sense from you as to what are some of the issues and the costs that can be incurred in this transition or transformation, and then what are some things that policymakers, business leaders should be really thinking about?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I mean, I'd go to this issue first of, from the business perspective. I mean, if you're a board of directors in this new era, I think you really have to rethink what your moats are, what your assets are. You know, you're a data company. No matter who you are, you're a data company. And you have to think about what that data is, how you can access it. And then you have to think about, can you be replaced by a clever agent or a clever AI model? You know, if you're a law firm, you may be, you know, the next owner of a taxi medallion that goes out of business when Uber comes along. Same thing if you're an architecture firm, if you're an accounting firm. And that a little bit gets into the regulatory space, because we're used to thinking of those professional services as having a certain kind of accountability to their users. You know, if you go to a lawyer or a therapist or an accountant, they've been trained, they've been licensed, they have fiduciary responsibilities to you. They're not, because they have an asymmetry of information about you, they're not supposed to share confidential information that you give with them. If customers are suddenly having conversations with their AI, there's been a democratization of expertise. They suddenly get a lot more access. It's a lot cheaper. There's a lot that's wonderful about that. But we also have to think about what are the costs in terms of accountability. And so I think some of the industries, the professional services industry, should be really thinking about that, not just what are the responsibilities of a lawyer who uses AI, what's the future of the legal industry, how do we attack ourselves, how do we become our own incumbents, but then think about how accountability is going to be out there. Some of the other issues I think about a lot are, you know, and before we get into the labor stuff, which I'm sure we'll all want to talk about, is how are we going to get the good stuff out of AI in addition to productivity? And one of the things that's always talked about is we're going to cure all these rare diseases. And that's super important to me. I have a family member who has rare disease. It's not going to happen again until we unlock the data and the regulatory system. Right now, if a pharmaceutical company runs a test on a drug and it's not successful, they don't make that data public because they may want to use it later. How are we going to incentivize drug companies to make that data available? How are we going to speed up the approval process so that we can really unlock some of those advantages that were promised about this for curing diseases? So I think there's just a lot of fascinating issues. We could go on, but we have to get into the nitty-gritty of it all and sort of unpack how we've constructed things in the 20th century to think what do we want to keep, and how do we make it appropriate for this new AI age?
And Joe mentioned human in the loop, and Karen, I want to stick with you. You know, human-centered AI, we discussed this as an important part of the process, keeping humans involved. Just want to get maybe everyone's take on kind of, is it a no-brainer? Yes. Human in the loop? Yes. You know, how are we building out AI? How should we be designing it? And who should be at the table in these cases where we're building out these training models, we're getting bigger? Give us a sense of your human-centered philosophy.
Yeah, I'm not going to answer the question, but I'll just say that there were two studies that came out in the last couple of weeks. There was that, how do you pronounce it, Ciprini? Was that Ciprini report that said it's 2028, there are no jobs, you know, there's been a big crash, the economy's a mess. And then there was another study that was less talked about that came out of Princeton that talked about, yes, there's going to be a lot of adoption, but even though the models are getting better, their reliability isn't really changing, and that you need humans for the trust layer, basically. And so I think, I don't know which of those two is right, and I do note I mean, I like the idea of the Princeton study that we're going to need humans as the trust layer, but I also note that in the digital revolution that we've had, some of the services haven't been better, but they've still been cheaper or faster or just more successful in competing. So I'm not sure which of those two. I'm sure it's going to be a combination of those two.
Anyone want to jump in on human-centered, human-in-the-loop?
The one thing I was reading an Economist report this morning, and it actually talked about sort of how since the launch of ChatGPT, November of 2022, we actually have 3 million more white-collar roles in the United States. And I thought that was fascinating, but we have 7% more engineers than we did in November of 22. We have 21% more paralegals, and we have 10% more radiologists. All the roles that, you think would be at a threat from an AI perspective. And I think fundamentally what this continues to remind us is just like the technology revolution of the 1980s and the 1990s and the internet and the ATM. Gosh, people were really scared when ATM machines were deployed because they thought that would be the end of like branch banking. And here we are, and branches are incredibly important, right? And you could say the same for mobile. So I think in an age where, AI is going to present the opportunity for the mundane, repetitive work to be a lot more faster, a lot more efficient and automated, I think it does beg the question of like what kinds of new roles will evolve in the economy. Just like today we have design engineers and app development engineers, there's a whole new category of roles and jobs that are being created to support this human-in-the-loop AI revolution that we're seeing. And so I think fundamentally how we think about upskilling our organizations, our talent pool, our economy, I think that to me is like a fundamental question and one that I know actively a lot of organizations are focused on. So I think human-in-the-loop is obviously essential as you think about build, deploy. And as an operator, I'll tell you, it is so important as you think about change management. Like deploying an AI solution, the change management that goes around training, the communications plan, the training plan, that is so critical. So, I don't think we're really there yet where you can actually deploy AI at scale without human in the loop. I think what's really going to be interesting is how we upskill the organizations and the economy to actually adopt to these new roles that come out of this AI revolution.
Thank you. Igor, I want to turn to you because you do a lot of work around workforce upskilling with your World Quant University. Can you share your approach and the work you've been doing? You also have wrote a piece on the President's AI Action Plan, and how does that fit into your work?
Yes, well, I would also like to add that since GPT was here, our headcount has only gone up, not down, but we have become more efficient, which leads one to believe that the work we have been doing 3-4 years ago was a bit more low level than the work we are doing now and the work we will be doing in the future, and that the amount of this high level, very interesting yet unknown work is quite large. So we don't really have to worry about putting humans in the loop, because the loop will produce efficiency, and then the efficiency will produce a different goals for the human, creating a new loop, and that loop will grow, and so on. So again, I think I answered a little bit my own question. You asked me how what we're doing fits within the president's plan. I think we fit in whatever we can. We've thrown a very large amount of resources in automating everything we can. We can't build data centers or do things like that, but on the other parts, we're doing our share and just moving forward as fast as we can. Our goal is to increase productivity 100 times this year.
I mean, workforce transformation. Eric, do you want to jump in on kind of what we're seeing in the markets right now? There's lots of big headlines on changes and displacement disruption. Give us your take.
Sure. It's really nice to be on such a smart panel. These are really good comments. I'm going to marry three things I heard from Joe, Karen, and Igor, and then end with something that Kip said. I think it's all going to tie together. So whenever anybody hears the term, the law of unforeseen consequences, usually feels negative. It doesn't always have to be negative. And Joe, I thought you made an amazing observation about app development, especially because of the firm in which you work, big IT budget. I remember vividly, unfortunately I'm old enough to remember this, that when the first true wave of internet technology was happening, sort of late 90s into 2003, 2004, that it was all over. No more software, no more people, it was all over. And I mean, this was not said half jokingly, this was said all over the place. And I think people like to borrow analogs that go back to the steam engine or railroads. We don't have to go back that far. The predictive elements from that moment in time to today shows you how right and wrong they were. Yes, those industries are massive, but we have more people in the workforce in the United States than we ever had in history. So that's not an unemployment or employment point, it's just how many people are working. And a huge percentage of those people work in tech and infrastructure and IT, et cetera. What I would also like to borrow is Karen's point about the economic aspects of how this works, and you'll be much better at explaining this than I ever would, but technological shifts usually expand economic output. It's highly irregular when you have a massive technological shift and all of a sudden you have a downgrade in GDP. Now I understand when people hear that, they say, well, GDP could go up and unemployment could go up. I think we have to borrow Igor's point, which is, I can tell you at Guggenheim, I'm sure it's true for all of us, we're looking to hire more people than we ever have. Now, will the nature of those people be a little more technical? Will they have more of an understanding of how to use these technologies in order to answer highly complex questions? Absolutely. But there is an opportunity, and I'll end with JP Morgan, which I believe has the highest IT budget of any multinational firm, and it's a huge company. When you think about the way in which problems are solved, sure, there can be technologies that are invented to do so, but at least what I've seen in my career, and it's approaching 30 years, is it's nearly impossible to deploy new technology without services. And professional services is still the largest component of the way in which people, I don't know if that's my mic or.
We'll proceed.
Hello? We got it? All right, yeah, no problem. Yeah, we need AI. Does anybody have an AI agent quickly? Well done in the front. But I think that people can't fully appreciate how change creates more jobs. And I really think we're just on the precipice of that. And I know I'm repeating myself, but we have to be very careful to be driven by, and this is coming from someone who's in the markets, but we have to be careful when the markets are deciding the impact that something has when the outcome is unknown. Because the discount rate becomes extreme and you assume it's all going to happen at the same time, and I just don't believe that.
Well, we're talking about workforce and we're talking about jobs. I want to move to agentic commerce, where you have AI agents that are basically going to be employees, right? They're going to be taking action. They're going to handle your entire journey. They're going to search across platforms. They're going to make comparisons. They're going to complete transactions. I have one question for everyone. Do you trust AI with your credit card? You want to give me your credit card and let it make transactions for you?
Today, no. I don't. But I do think agentic commerce is a space that's fast evolving. It is one that I think there's a lot more work from a policy or regulatory perspective that I think we need to bring together in agentic commerce. There's no natural standard setting body like you have in open banking and some of the other innovations that we've seen over the last couple of years. And I think a lot of organizations, right, whether they're the technology companies, the merchants, the payment service providers, and the banks, I think we're all trying to figure out what this ecosystem is going to mean. From my perspective as a banking organization where the implications of agentic commerce are going to be real is, I'm a customer, I go in, I want to buy a pair of red pants. When the price hits $50 and the agent buys 2 pairs of red pants from 2 different stores, both of which are less than $50, it fulfilled the task, right? But the first call that I'm going to make when I figured out that it bought 1, not 2, is probably going to be to my bank. Before I call the merchant, before I don't even know how to call Google, before I call Stripe or, it's going to be the bank. Because, as your card issuer, right, like that's the place you go when you want to file a dispute. And that process and that workload and the servicing and the data, like that is what keeps me up a little bit at night when I think about agentic commerce. I do firmly believe that as an industry, as a cross-section of a variety of, I'd say, participants in this complex ecosystem, including the card networks, including, technology providers and all of the others that I mentioned, I do think kind of coming up with a certain set of standards and an operating mechanism is going to be very, very important.
So, Eric and Kip, can I get you in the agentic commerce conversation? Can you describe some of the unlock, the possibility for it? I mean, there's definitely been some numbers around it.
Sure. For me, from a policy perspective, right, there are certainly some, within the bank, there are some really promising opportunities and some unlocks, particularly in the payment space. But, wearing my policy hat, which is my comfort zone here, is that this is really representative of the acceleration of the innovation cycles that we're seeing, and really the ways in which the policy conversations are so far behind. And when it comes to agentic, for example, at this time last year, this would have been a buzzword at best. And at this point, we're talking about the need for entirely unique standard-setting organizations and just new architectures to support this innovation. And when you sort of prompted the question, you used the word trust. Do you trust agentic AI with your credit card information? And we continue to have a trust problem and challenge. In the United States in particular, year over the past 3 years, we are seeing declining trust sentiments toward artificial intelligence and toward the institutions that use them. And that sort of consumer sentiment is going to inhibit adoption at the enterprise level. It's going to put companies in a position of thinking twice before pushing AI onto their customers. But it is also going to sort of speak to, if you're thinking about success metrics for the economy, AI can only unlock value. It only delivers value if it is deployed, and deployment depends on trust. And so we really need, at this point, before we can even get to sort of a layer of policy considerations for agentic AI, we're still, if you think about kind of the pyramid structure here, the base layer of the pyramid is still in a really early kind of infant stage of policy development. And we really, this also speaks to the need for the policy outcomes here to be technology neutral, adaptable to future waves of innovation, principles based, but really that can give a lot more certainty and clarity to enterprises. At JP Chase, I mentioned we had the advantage of a kind of regulatory inspired trust architecture already within. It really has, I think, enabled innovation in some sense for us. because we have that intimate relationship with our risk surface areas. And so I think that this speaks to the need to kind of bring some of those learnings to the wider policy conversation and to bring other deployer voices into these policy conversations too, to really elevate, the importance of what it's going to take to unlock these opportunities and to deliver the type of value that, that the economy is really expecting from these technologies.
Thank you, Kip. I want to put one more layer on the table because I promised everyone that we were going to talk a little bit about national security and cybersecurity. So I don't want to leave that off. There's an increasing recognition that AI is going to play a critical role in national security. We have a head start, meaning the U.S., but as other nations around the world scale up their capabilities, how does AI level the playing field in defense and cybersecurity? I want to turn to Karen, to Igor. We talked a little bit about war games. Give us a sense of, in these final minutes, how AI plays a role in some of these spaces, and what do we need to continue to keep our eye on the ball? Maybe Karen?
Yeah, great. I'm assuming everybody saw the big fight between Anthropic and the Department of Defense/War over the last 2 weeks. And this was over two things that are pretty concerning. One is mass surveillance of American citizens, and the other was whether there should be a human in the loop. And, I think these are not things that should be handled in a contract dispute. These are the kinds of things that, Congress has got to put on its big boy pants and deal with. And I think there's on the one hand in the public, and in the intelligentsia, this sense that policy is going to, Congress is going to deal with this. It's getting ripe. On my way over, I was listening to a podcast. Bill Kristol was talking about, we should have a big commission that's going to come up with the kinds of policies that we're going to have. But there's a heated dispute where OpenAI, Mark Andreessen, a bunch of folks in Silicon Valley really want zero regulation, don't even want ethics rules. And so I think if we're going to get to a real, and yet the public, I should just say, if you look at polling, the public wants some guardrails. I'm sure they don't want anything that's going to kill the industry, kill innovation, kill growth, but I think they're ready for a switch, a pendulum swing towards some guardrails and, and just less influence of the industry, some of these poll numbers show, in DC. So I think we're headed for interesting times. Politicians, I think, if the 26 midterms are about grocery prices, I think the 28 campaign for presidency, I think AI is going to be part of it. There's going to be a question about how are we remaking our economy to be appropriate for AI, and I think it's going to be really interesting. But I think we're going to have to do a lot of spade work before then to make sure that there are really serious things being considered, not just populist, feel-good policies. And I think we can start with things like how is it used in national security and in surveillance in the public. We've already seen ICE is collecting facial recognition data and so on, the kinds of things that are outlawed in Europe. We have to have a real detailed, expert-led conversation on these things.
Igor, you want to jump into the defense side, the defense national security perspective you have?
I think if we're going to make AI, then we have to make the best AI that we can. And the best AI will be made with minimal guardrails. Just look at Europe with all those guardrails and where its AI has gone, and then look at the smaller countries that don't really have many guardrails and how well it's doing. I'm not saying guardrails don't have a place, but they probably don't belong in the code. They belong in a legislative place, something watching and setting rules for what things can or cannot do. But if you start putting guardrails inside the code, you're just going to get bad AI and become uncompetitive.
Thank you. So for my last question, I just want everyone to quickly just fire off. So we had this table, common table, different chairs. What do you think that everyone out here should be reading, thinking about, consuming to get their AI acumen up? What should we be doing to make sure we are up in our game in AI and we're not moving through fear and uncertainty, we're moving with empowerment? Give us something that we should be consuming. It could be a book, a podcast, a point of view. Love to hear your thoughts. Maybe I'll start with you, Kip.
Sure. I would say, I would encourage everybody to, this is a little bit meta, but I would say watching the geopolitical environment right now, it's really important. It's not theater, it's not an abstraction. I think that it's, there are some trends around sovereignty in particular that are going to have real implications for the future of this technology, how it's built, how it operates, and what its potential is. And so if we're seeing kind of an increased sort of isolationism around the world and, following these trends and understanding their intersection with the direction of travel for this technology and its opportunity, I think it's really important.
Thank you, Kip. Igor, what should we be consuming? Besides going to World Quant University, what should we be doing?
I think somebody who wants to learn AI should get their hands dirty, get into AI, try to figure something out that you haven't figured out before. Check your bills for the last 10 years, find mistakes in them. Just use what's out there and keep your finger on the pulse because it changes all the time.
That's great, Igor. Thank you. Eric.
I love that. If you all haven't, I would strongly encourage you to go onto your favorite AI platform and ask very, very direct questions and have it learn. If you're not paying for it, you have to in order to have this happen. But have it learn what your concerns are. And every time you interact with it and you ask a question, whether it's I'm trying to solve this specific thing for a client, or my family member is dealing with this, or I wouldn't use it too much for medical help, which a lot of people still do. There'll be a time for that. I think it's a little too early. But it will learn what your concerns are, and you should push the AI on that. That's one thing. And then secondly, I do think from a policy perspective, I agree with Karen. I think you have to develop a point of view for yourself as to what the right answer is. This is one of those amazing moments in history where so much is happening all at the same time. And I think we can unequivocally say that no one knows what the right answer is yet. So I'd develop a strong thesis just consuming what's happening in congressional races and presidential races and also internationally, to Igor's point.
Thank you,
I
Eric.
totally agree with the idea that we need to use AI as much as you possibly can. But also I'd recommend a podcast. There's a great podcast that I was just listening to yesterday that I really recommend called China Talk. And they're really expert in the competition with China, in the export control debate, the national security debate, but then they also bring on people who are incredibly sophisticated from a technology point of view. So it's really, if you want to have that kind of, exactly what you're saying, the nitty-gritty understanding that you're going to need to have opinions about the geopolitics, the civil liberties, the workforce things, I think they're extremely helpful.
And final, Joe.
It's hard to go last on this topic, so I'd say what I was going to say has been repeated 3 times, but I was going to say actually go build something, because nothing teaches you better than actually getting your hands dirty and building something. My 12-year-old, or actually 11-and-a-half-year-old, is actually building an app to solve a Rubik's Cube, because he's like big into speed cubing and all of that. So I think it's an 11-year-old can do it. I'm sure everybody in this room can do it. So go learn it and get your hands dirty. I think the only other thing I'd say is I really like the Notebook LLM app, which I think many of you in the room probably use, or if you don't, you should. It's a pretty cool way to learn and research. And I found that just in my own kind of personal, professional life to be helpful.
Thank you, everyone, for this conversation. Please join me in thanking our speakers on AI and the digital transformation.